Welcome to FO Talks. With me is Lorenzo Tugnoli, an Italian journalist. Welcome, Lorenzo. Before we begin, I just want you to give us a short introduction. Who are you and what are you doing? Where are you right now? And tell us about the book you're writing.
I am in Damascus at the moment. I'm an Italian photojournalist, and I've been working in the Middle East for over a decade now. And what I'm presenting today is a book of my images, and this book has been the images were done in Afghanistan between 2019 to 2023. So it was they were done basically before the return of the Taliban to Kabul and after the return of the Taliban to Kabul. So the book uh, that is called "It Can Never Be the Same" tell the story of this big change in the country.
You've named the book "It Can Never Be the Same." I want to know a little bit more of why do you think why did you name it that? And maybe you can talk about 2019 to 2021, and then what is not the same.
Um, Well, thank you for the question. It's a really interesting question. Obviously, in any book, uh, the process of choosing a name is really long and complex. The the book was developed by me with the assistance of a scholar, of a researcher, a person called Francesca Recchia that I collaborated with for a long time, and who's also wrote final text in the book. So it was a there was a lot of collaboration in the phase of assembling the editing and there are and the book again gathered these images of this important moment of the story of this country, but and these images are images of photojournalism, but the point of the book is not really telling a story that has been told a lot in the media, but kind of reflect on how this story have been told. And so there is a reflection on the language of photojournalism and a reflection of on journalism. And so in my so after spending many years in Afghanistan, my relation with the country is also a relation with the visual representation of a country because I'm a photographer, and the tradition of this visual representation of this place. And unfortunately, my opinion is that there has been a quite stable, a quite unchanged way of looking at this place, and so the title is mostly about reflecting on how we foreigners have been looking at this country, have been representing this place, and after so many things that have changed, after so many things that happened in the country, we continue to look at it the same way. And so the title is "It Can Never Be the Same," but we keep looking at it in the same way. And also, I think there is another aspect to the title, and again, is an aspect that is related to how we look at things and how we do our job as a journalist. And it's about the difference between uh, being in a place, seeing it, and experiencing it, and representing it. And it can never be the same. Be in a place and looking at looking at a picture of it. So yeah, I think is a way to tell. The title is a way to introduce you to this concept of how do we represent a place, how do we tell a story.
I really like that, how you put it, that how do you tell a story, because Afghanistan is full of stories. I mean, arguably it's one of the most photographed region in the world, and I mean, and most of the photographs have been very cliche. You know, men holding guns, women in burqas. I was there in Afghanistan in 2019. Actually, I was in Kabul, and I'll tell you how different it was when I was there in person. I mean, it was much more than that. So when you've got a book of photos about the lives of people in Afghanistan. Tell us some of the moments you thought that the world should have known, like a picture that you think that people would never take it that this is Afghanistan.
Um, well, that's interesting. Um, well, I think it's interesting what you've been talking how you started this question. I mean, like you said that it's been photographed a lot, and I think every photographer who arrives in Afghanistan for the first time, every photographer who have a kind of a idea of history of photography, an idea of what happened in terms of media in Afghanistan before he arrives, um, you immediately realize that um, you are dealing with the material that has been really important for the tradition of photojournalism, and he's been in the magazine for many years. I mean, the war in the civil war in Afghanistan was the invasion. These are things that happened before I was born. So but already so as a photojournalist, I for me it was really important to kind of interact with this visual tradition, this visual language of uh, of uh, of photojournalism, and kind of like reflect on my position in as one of the many photographers who have been there and have looked at this place. And I think it's like uh, for me it helped me a lot to live in Afghanistan. I lived in Afghanistan um, from 2009 to 2015, and then I kept going back. But I think it's like what you do, what you photograph there. It's usually you start with a cliche, so you start with like the Kalashnikov and the burkas, and then with the time, after like a decade you've been there, you have enough of this stuff, and you slowly can see other things, and I think it's a country that has a lot of different layers. Um, Visually, meaning that a lot of the times what we see and what we interpret with our Western point of view, at least what I interpret with my Western background and point of view, is sometimes more complicated than what first met our eyes, or is different. And so I think also in the way media have been telling this country, there were a lot of misunderstanding um, events or aspects that have been not presented in a really correct way or precise way. And so there has been a lot of ambiguity. There was a lot of ambiguity in the country at the time, and I think what I want to do with this book is also leave these um, ambiguity out there. I don't want to like tell you the whole story. I want to leave open the interpretation of that. Um, I think again, like so, just to answer your question, I think is like one of the interesting things that photography can do is leave open certain um, interpretation, and while this aspect is sometimes uh, frowned upon in photojournalism, meaning that photojournalism traditionally should be a way to tell the truth or tell the truth if it does exist. But anyway, we should strive to tell the story as accurately we possibly can. But there is an ambiguity to the photography. Like we look at the picture, and if we don't know the people, we don't know the context, sometimes we misunderstand it. And I think it's like, and so there are many moments in the book in which we don't know exactly what happened. Like, for example, there is a series of images of a group of Afghan soldiers dancing in an outpost, a military outpost, because they are celebrating a temporary ceasefire. Um, and they have guns, but they have civilian clothes that in Afghanistan are long um, long dress, like in that region. Um, uh, and so they look like Taliban, and a lot of people, because that's how Afghan looks, and not because there is like a difference. Again, Taliban and soldiers, they are the same young man with the gun that you could see, and unfortunately, they don't really look different once you take off um the uniform, right? So I like this kind of ambiguity that, like, if you don't look at the caption, obviously there are captions, but there is a moment in which you're like, wait, but who am I looking at?
I really like that example of the young Afghan soldiers and how they look like that and how they look like Taliban. I mean, Taliban are young. Taliban is basically translated into students. So they're all young boys who've been fighting and doing. I mean, that's a story for a different day. But I don't want to get into spoilers, Lorenzo. Can you tell one moment of your book which has stayed with you? It stuck with you, and you want to tell a story to the world. Do you have that one image?
Um, well, that's a complicated question. I mean, I think it's like the so what it's complicated. I explain to you why it's complicated. So I worked 5 years. So I mean, like from the very beginning of 2019 to the end of 2023 on this book, and I did many stories because the book, the images that have been shot for the book have mostly been done as on assignment for the Washington Post. um, I'm a contract photographer for the Washington Post, so I work mostly for them. Um, and so a lot of these stories were done, a lot of these images were done as part of stories that were aimed at a news or a story for a newspaper. And then what happened is that I stopped, let's say the kind of like the idea of like the project, and I decided, okay, I have this body of work and I want to work on it. And then what I did is I went back and I started looking at every single image I shot these 5 years. So I kind of like um, wanted to use the images outside of the idea of the news, but kind of like give a new interpretation, new life to these images. And in fact, the images were originally published in color and in in the newspaper. while in the book is black and white, and and so the images are taking um, a new a new a new role, and so I think it's and the role is a lot of the times not telling the story of like a particular incident, while it's telling something that has been part of the of like of like the general story. Um, there are just that are that are that now are like I think like you know if you do that, if you like leave the picture there for a bit, sometimes you find something that is really interesting, and at the beginning you didn't uh, you didn't know. um, like for example, one of the picture that is in the book is a picture of um, uh, Jalalabad Air Base. So, in the United States, the U.S., an American Army base that is also the Army base where the commando left when they went to arrest Bin Laden. Um, and in this airfield, there is like a waiting room. If you are waiting for cargo, like a military plane. And in the waiting room, the U.S. Army, they hang pictures of New York. So the sky, you can see the skyline of New York, but you can see the skyline pre 9/11. So they made a point of showing you New York in Jalalabad, um, with the Twin Towers still there. So obviously, I took a picture of this place with some kind of like fake plastic flowers that they use in Afghanistan, um, or in the region, in Pakistan, in the region. Um, and at that point, I wasn't thinking it would have been, like such an important picture that I would even use in the book. But then it becomes such a metaphor of this kind of mission that Americans put together to go into a faraway place and to at least through their propaganda saying that they are bringing, you know, prosperity and civilization and democracy. And and this twisted mission that happened that in Afghanistan that self-assigned by the Americans, in which they arrived in 2001 in a country in Afghanistan, to kill Bin Laden. They take 10 years to kill Bin Laden, and then they stay other 10 years in the country, and then um, they proceed to leaving the country exactly as it was before. The Taliban were in Kabul, they were at the government in Kabul before, and they are now. So, I mean, it's the whole story of the war and the whole mission is completely paradoxical, and you just end up asking yourself why, what's the meaning of all this. And again, I think it's like in the book, I wanted a lot of ambiguity. There were a lot of moments of in which like the audience don't really know what's going on, because it was like that, leaving this place. And again, the whole mission, the whole reason of the war, it's always been like not really clear.
I'm going to go back to something you had said earlier about misunderstandings, and you've said that Afghanistan resists foreign understanding. Um, do you think the return of Taliban is a result of foreign misunderstanding? Do you think the Western powers completely misread Afghanistan after, at least the US, after spending almost 2 decades in that country?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think like the misunderstanding and the lack of deep understanding was one of the factor of why the war went so horribly wrong. Um, and I think there are different layers to this misunderstanding. One that I mean, misunderstanding is not only about language, it's about culture, but it's also about interests. Meaning that the misunderstanding is while this word can sound like um, naive, meaning that you arrive in a place and you don't understand or you misunderstand what's happening. That is actually what happened at the beginning of my book. I mean, the beginning of my book, there is a quote, there is a little story in which exactly this happened. Like somebody arrived in a place and doesn't understand what happened there. But unfortunately, there is also another layer to misunderstanding, um, and a layer, a part that 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 has to be that has to do with the fact that there was not really um, a need to understand, meaning that when you are a foreign power occupying a place, you don't need to understand. You have a gun, and so it wasn't a misunderstanding a lot of the time. There was also a lack of trying to understand because, you know, what was happening in Afghanistan was that mostly people that were taking decision, important decision of the country, were either in Washington or were behind blast walls in UN compounds somewhere. People that have never seen the country, that never even walked down the road to buy bread because they couldn't, because of the security reason. But the problem is that there was such a big difference between a big divide, you know, blast walls between the people who are taking the decision and the people who are actually leaving the country. But it's not only misunderstanding because you don't understand Dari or Pashtun, the local language. It's wasn't a misunderstanding because there was not interested in understanding the Afghans, because what was happening in Afghanistan was not done to help the Afghan. What was done to serve um, political agendas that were serving the United States, that were serving Europe. I mean, we know that people were not really there to help the Afghans. People were there. I mean, armies were there to fight their own war.
I'm actually really glad you brought up the blast walls because I've seen them in person, and you're right. There's the compounds behind the blast walls are not Afghanistan at all. In fact, it's a recreation of whichever country you were from. It's you basically created almost every embassy created their own country behind those blast walls. And then you come onto the other side of blast walls, and it's beautiful because Afghans, especially led by a renowned artist known as Omer Sharifi, they have painted the blast walls. And these paintings are beautiful because they've got messages of love and peace. And it's so different. It's so stark. And I don't want to take more of your time, Lorenzo, but my last question to you is this, and I want to come back to It Can Never Be the Same, your book. What do you want to tell the world about Afghanistan with It Can Never Be the Same?
Um, Again, it's a question. It's a difficult question, but I think it's like the book, more than actually telling something, it wants to take you into a world. I hope. I hope. I hope that if you go through the book, you will go through. You will find yourself in this world of what was Afghanistan before the end of the war and what was Afghanistan was after, how it changed. So I'm not trying to tell you like what is true, but hopefully I will be able to bring you into the atmosphere of a place, of a world that was there. And a lot of this atmosphere was this sense of instability and this ambiguity about what was really happening. Because at the time in Kabul, or in Afghanistan, there were bombings, there were events that happened, and often it wasn't clear who did it or why it happened. And these and so it was really difficult to understand the country games because of these many layers. So I hope this book is not exactly telling you what happened, telling you the truth, but bringing you into that moment.
I think that was very well put. I'm sure everyone's going to be looking forward to getting a copy of that. Thank you so much, Lorenzo, for joining in and telling us about your work. And hopefully, I'll get to speak to you sometime again soon.
Okay.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.